Hey everyone, Studios Toe here, and welcome to The Bagel Nation. Today, I'm going to ask the question, what does Dark Souls say? And more specifically, what does Dark Souls say about creating? This is the first episode in a new series concerning Dark Souls 2 called What Does Dark Souls Say? I made a similar video about the original Dark Souls, which dealt a lot with the Witch of Izalith and the Bed of Chaos. Spoilers of Dark Souls 2 will follow, but I assume if you're watching this you don't really care. So, the Lord Souls of the original Dark Souls game make a reappearance in Dark Souls 2. When I first heard about needing to get 4 Great Souls, I was immediately excited because it follows much the same pattern of the original game. In Dark Souls 1, you have to kill the 4 Lord Soul bosses and possess their souls to advance to Gwyn, the final boss. You got these souls from Seat the Scaleless Gravelord Nito, the 4 kings who received their soul from Lord Gwyn, and the Bed of Chaos, which is the result of the Witch of Izalith trying to recreate the first flame. So since I've previously discussed the Bed of Chaos, the Witch of Izalith, and how they relate to humanity, not the item, but humankind, us, I thought I would start there with Dark Souls 2. In Dark Souls 1, Elena tells us that her mother has spent 1,000 years atoning for her misguided intentions. She begs you to free her mother's soul. In Dark Souls 2, Sweet Shalquar tells us that the lost sinner lives deep within the Bastille. For the sin of trying to light the first flame, this certainly sounds familiar. And indeed, in New Game Plus, when the player kills the lost sinner, they receive the Old Witch Soul. The item description reads, "This once magnificent soul continues to exert influence over the land, even after the eons have reduced it to these remnants." This is the Lord Soul, which was claimed by the Witch of Izalith. Now, some will argue that the lost sinner is the Witch of Izalith. I doubt this to be the case, but it certainly at this point is a legitimate theory. Regardless, however, the Lost Sinner gives us a significant insight into one of the major themes of Dark Souls 2. The simple way to look at this theme is to say that history repeats itself, but this is of course a cliche, and I think Dark Souls 2 goes deeper than that. In the opening cinematic, the old Firekeeper tells us that you'll lose your souls, all of them, over and over again. This is the struggle of the Souls games. Being forced to do the same thing over and over, being forced to grind your way through hordes of enemies, only to be crushed by a seemingly impossible boss. The odds are stacked against the player, and it seems we are doomed to repeat our failures over and over again. We see this theme in every aspect of the game world of Dark Souls 2. Drangleic is very much like Lordran, though it's clear this is a different time. I believe this is the physical place of Lordran, and there's plenty of evidence to support that. Numerous mentions are made of many kingdoms rising and falling on this very spot, this place where we play Dark Souls 2. And despite new names, new mechanics, and new ideas, it seems that the civilizations of Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 are doomed to repeat the mistakes and the failures over and over again. I personally sympathize greatly with the Witch of Izalith. Quailana admits that her mother's intentions were certainly misguided, but she has been forced to reckon with, to atone for, her mistakes for 1,000 years. Indeed, this is the fate of the lost sinner as well. Locked away, isolated, and atoning for the mistake of trying to play God, of trying to gain all the power fire provides, of wanting more. The original Dark Souls goes into a great amount of detail about what fire brings. Fire and disparity, of course. Heat, cold, life, death, light, and dark. We want more. As the ancient dragon tells us, the curse of life is the curse of want. For simply wanting more, both the lost sinner and the Witch of Izalith are cursed. For trying to create, they are cursed. For being alive, they are cursed. For being alive, we are cursed. We want, but we cannot be filled. Even when we gain or manage to create the object of our desires, we often come across consequences far greater than their reward. Vsauce has a great video entitled Our Narrow Slice, which discusses the work of Thomas Midgley Jr. Midgley was largely responsible for the addition of a lead-based compound into gasoline. He was treated on multiple occasions for lead poisoning, and during the time of leaded gasoline, 88% of American children had double the healthy amount of lead in their blood. Later, Midgley succeeded in synthesizing, in artificially creating the world's first chlorofluorocarbon, or CFC. His creation became widely used over the next few decades. It wasn't until years later, however, that we realized his CFC was destroying part of the Earth's atmosphere. Near the end of his life, he contracted polio, and he designed a seemingly brilliant system of ropes to help his family lift him and to tend for him. Unfortunately, this device would eventually strangle him to death. Midgley had more of an impact on the environment than any other creature has in history. If you're interested in learning more about Midgley's life and his contributions, check out that Vsauce video. Humanity is cursed with desire, with want. The misguided attempts of the Witch of Izalith and the lost sinner echo those of Thomas Midgley Jr. in the real world. So what does Dark Souls say about creating? Well, Dark Souls shows us the consequences of playing God, of trying to create. I'm Studious Toe, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. I really appreciate it. If you want to see the new videos in this series as they're released, or some of my other content, be sure to subscribe. As always, thanks for watching, and enjoy your stay in the Bagel Nation.